Welcome to another episode of Message from Mom, where we're busting the myth that mothers-in-law aren't necessarily monsters-in-law. And I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts who happen to be my daughters-in-law. And I have Kelly to the left of me.
Hi, I'm Kelly, and I'm married to Beth's oldest son, Alex.
And Chelsea to the right.
Hi, I'm Chelsea, and I'm married to Beth's middle son, Andrew.
Although this is a podcast, so there really is no left or right in the podcast world, but physically that's where we sit. So we actually I love today's episode. So this is episode 34, and we had a little mini book club a few episodes ago, and we liked it so much that we thought that we would make it a recurring podcast. And so that's what it's all about today. So it's all about our little mini book club. And today we're discussing the mystery thriller suspense book, What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall. And here's just a little FYI, we will have spoilers throughout the podcast. So we could even say, spoiler alert. So if you haven't read the book, I just want
I think the whole thing will be a spoiler alert.
It really is. It just pretty much is. But if you've read the book, it's really great to tune in. But before we get into it, let's raise our glass and a toast, because we know you don't have to be a blood relative to love your relative. So cheers, ladies, to another episode.
Cheers.
And really, my message from Mom today is just short and sweet, because I just wanted to touch briefly on why reading and book clubs are so important. And they've been a huge part of my life, my entire life, especially as a young married woman. And then, as we moved from city to city, it was always really a great way to meet people and bond with people. And boy, do I love books. And I mean, I just do. I've always loved them. And here's a funny thing, and I think many book lovers will agree with this. I don't necessarily have to read the book to love the book. So I can have, and especially back in the day when I had way more shelf space, but I just would love to go to the bookstore and I would just buy a stack of books and bring them home. And I know that most sensible people might think, what's the point of buying a book if you don't read it? But that's just me. It doesn't bother me at all if I've never read a book and it's sitting beautifully on my bookshelf and somebody else might have the opportunity to read it. But I do. I just love the smell of ink, and I love opening up a hardback book, and I love flipping through the pages, and I especially love coffee table books, which are just all about beauty. I mean, it's just really a work of art just sitting on my coffee table. So, and I also have a reading list that sometimes reaches into the double digits, because I'm always like, somebody will mention this, and I have a really good friend that loves to read, and you two are pretty good readers too. So I'm like, oh yes, that's on my list, and that's on my list, and that, so that's on my list too. So, and then, as I said, as a young married wife and mom, I used to drive Mr. Stahl crazy, because I really did. I would have stacks and stacks and stacks of books by my bedside table. And even on the floor sometimes, because there are so many. But these days, because of the lack of shelf size in my home and the font size, because the print seems to get smaller and smaller every year, and it's harder and harder for me to read actual physical books. So I really have taken to listening to audiobooks, and I love Audible. Great subscriptions to have, and I've had that for years. Sometimes I even give it as gifts to people, because I think it's
a good gift.
It really is. It just is. But and Audible books are easy to take on trips, and you can just pop your earbuds in, and if you're at the airport or if you're on a car trip, then it's on your car player. But absolutely love books, and I particularly like book clubs because, as I said, it was a really great venue for me to meet other people, and we always had the commonality of loving books. But book clubs are really fun because you gather once a month and you discuss a book that's been selected for that month, and it's a great opportunity to learn what other readers are thinking and that what they've learned from the book. And I may have missed something, and that's really that's the beauty of a book club. And one of the biggest benefits of belonging to a book club, besides a great company, is that you will read books you normally wouldn't pick up.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. I mean, it forces me to read genres. I mean, I would just gravitate towards the same ones all the time. And so that brings me to today's selection, because this was picked by Chelsea. And I honestly, I don't normally gravitate towards this genre, which is, suspense, thriller, mystery. But I do love to have my horizons expanded. And especially as I age, because you really can sort of get stuck in your ways sometimes.
Yeah.
And as I said, I would, tend to just gravitate towards, but books that are in my wheelhouse. So I was eager to dive into this book because it wasn't in my genre. But before I hand it off, and I think I did say this already, but before I hand it off to Chelsea, there will be spoilers throughout this podcast. So just FYI. So Chelsea, I'm going to throw it off to you. And so why did you pick out today's book?
Well, I love murder, mystery, thriller books. That is definitely the genre that I tend to go towards, especially if I'm, in Barnes and Noble and I'm picking out something. But I picked this one out. So I know we actually just recently did an episode on TikTok, but over on Book Talk, I guess, if you want to say, I came across this one girl that was recommending, she had like her top 5 murder mystery thriller books. And I think out of the top 5, I had already read like 3 of them. And this was, 2 of the 5 that I hadn't read. And so that's how I basically came to pick it out. I looked up what it was about a little bit, and it's good.
Yeah. So it was from Book Talk over on TikTok.
Yeah.
So that's where you.
So that's how I found it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then I know you guys like to do kind of audiobooks, which I don't know. Is that how you guys? Okay.
Mostly these days.
So I'm the only one that actually like physically read it because I don't do audio. But yeah. So I'm always curious to see like how people interpret it differently.
Which, the narrator of an audiobook, and even just absorbing a book over audio versus reading, gives you so many different insights than just reading the book, because you hear voices in your head and you read lines in your head. But when you actually have a narrator giving that to you, it can change how you
perceive
things.
it.
Especially when it comes to reading the characters.
It can make or break a book. And I've had this discussion many times with a local book club that I was part of, and it would be very interesting because that would come up. It's like, okay, did you listen to it or did you read it? Because you would have 2 completely different.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
So I guess we'll see if we
comparative exercise.
It is.
But
So, well, we're going to have Chelsea, not Chelsea. I'm looking at Kelly. I get these 2 mixed up all the time. I used to do that with my children too. So, and they would be like, "That's not my name," like especially when they're in trouble. And I'm like, "Whatever your name is, come here."
You're the one I mean,
Kelly.
Yes,
you're really good at synopses. So, why don't you just give us just a brief rundown of this book?
Okay. I'm actually going to read a little bit from the synopsis that I found online, just because it's probably more concise than I want to. I kind of want to ramble a bit about this book because there's a lot of rabbit holes.
There's a lot. Yes.
So the novel is a mystery thriller. It focuses on a woman trying to understand traumatic events that befell her and her 2 best friends during their childhood in a small town in the Pacific Northwest. So, our main character, our protagonist, Naomi, the book is told from her perspective. We get a lot of insight into how she operates as a woman in her life. And so we're going into this story from Naomi's perspective. And so everything that she is discovering and learning about the events that she goes to try to, find out what happened, they're only revealed to us as they're revealed to her. And that, I think, is a truly good mystery, right? Because it's not like watching a movie where we can, we as the audience know things that the protagonist doesn't yet know.
Right.
So this book is truly mysterious because we are just finding out as she is. And she doesn't even go back to her small town to find out what happened, because she and her life at this point is pretty solid on her experience of what had happened to her, even though she may like mentally not be fully like dealing with it in the best way. She goes back for a totally other reason. And it's only being back in the town that she starts to discover what actually happened to her. And that's where the mystery really takes off. So it's a very, I really enjoyed the writing of this book. I felt like the protagonist wasn't annoying, which is important when that's the voice that you're interpreting everything through. Interestingly about Kate Alice Marshall, the author, this is, I think, one of only 2 adult books that she's written. She's normally a YA,
a young adult
writer. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. Because I think a lot of this book does happen in flashback. Not a lot of it, but good portions of it are happening in flashback. And I think her handle on capturing the voice of young and adolescent girls was pretty spot on. It felt authentic.
Yeah.
So I assume that her YA experience really came into play with that.
Yeah.
I really like this book. I'll just go and say that from the start before we start talking about the ins and outs of it.
Right, because there are a lot of twists and turns because it is a thriller and a suspense, and then there's murder and mayhem, and the usual, cast of mischievous, despicable people that go along with murder and mayhem. But I like this book too, and I did mention this, from the get go. This is not, I don't gravitate towards, suspense thrillers, but I thought this was very well done. And when I was doing research on it, I came across an article. I don't know if the author, Kate Alice Marshall, based it on a true life story, but there is a true life story of 2 young girls in Wisconsin that attempted to murder their friend in the woods. So this book could be, loosely based on that, on true life experiences. So, because, and as we'll get into it, and, so I've already let a spoiler out. So the book opens up where, well, now, gosh, does the book open up where they're 11 years old or no?
It's
If the book opens up with Naomi.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Naomi is going about her life. The book opens with Naomi living in Seattle. So she's still in the Pacific Northwest. She's a wedding photographer and she's living with a man who I can't remember if they actually say how long that they've been together, but when Naomi is describing her relationship with him, it's not, and we find clearly thereafter that she's not the kind of person who is in long-term relationships, right? But she is living with a man and they've been together long enough to where it seems like they're pretty comfortable in their life, although she is clearly very uncomfortable in that domestic kind of situation.
Right. And as you said, so she's a wedding photographer, which is interesting because, and that's one of our questions. So I'll throw this up to both of you. So why do you think Naomi chose that profession, based on, and we do find out fairly early in the book that she was brutally attacked, had to really fight for her life, and then has been disfigured somewhat because of that attack in the woods. And so it is interesting. And I found that very interesting that she's a photographer of a very special day. Doesn't really seem like she highly values her clients. I mean, she's right. I mean, did you get that?
Like she,
I think that it seemed from the perspective that I got is that she chose being a wedding photographer because that was maybe an escape from her past life of what happened to her and how she was attacked and how she grew up and later on, like, and I'm sure that we'll talk about this, but her home life wasn't necessarily the best either, and that's completely separate from the attack that happened. But that's the vibe that I get, is that this is almost and it kind of talks about this a little bit at the beginning, but the boyfriend that she lives with, he's very big on, why don't you photograph real life, and why aren't you photographing yourself? And I think she kind of at the beginning makes it very clear, like, I don't want to open myself up like that to people.
She's we do learn that she so I think one of the central tenets of this character is escapism. So like we learn really early on she suffered through this horrible attack. When she came of age, she, and she grew up in a very kind of almost negligent home life. Her mother ran out. Her father was a drunk. Everyone in her town thought she was kind of trashy because they were so poor. Her dad's a hoarder, all of these things. She moves out of this town after high school and completely changes who she is. She changes her name. She does have this horrible scar on her face that she can't get away from necessarily, but she does start leading a life that is a little bit dangerous, almost like she feels like she's living on borrowed time. So she's very promiscuous. And I do agree with Chelsea in that I think that the wedding photography, she's also a very artistic person, right? And so we see that artistic side of her coming out with photography, and then more specifically the wedding photography, because I think, like you said, she doesn't have a high view of marriage, doesn't even like being in relationships with other people. And we do know that she's bisexual at this point too, has been in relationships with women and men. But she doesn't really value any of that stuff at all. And so the wedding photography thing is almost like her voyeuristic way to kind of be a part of that kind of lifestyle, but without ever having to subscribe to it fully.
Just make a career out of it. Make some money off of it.
So she can be creative, but she doesn't have to like really put her heart and soul into her creativity because she's just photographing a thing for someone else.
Right.
And so her boyfriend is constantly wanting her, because he's an artist, he constantly wants her to be more artistic and like really explore that side of herself, in part because she's good at it, but also because he wants her to kind of therapeutically get it out. Right.
Well, and I kind of, her boyfriend that she's, I think Mitch. Right? That she's with, it almost kind of, the way that from her perspective, it made him seem like he, was almost with her because of the drama that came attached with her, with what happened to her in the past. And we kind of see that at the beginning. I know we haven't really touched on this, but, essentially why she goes back to her hometown is because she gets a phone call from one of her friends that was in the woods with her during this attack, and basically says, we need to talk. And this comes after she learns the news that the person that was put in jail for essentially attacking her died of cancer. And I feel
he was a serial killer.
Yes.
And just like in respect to her boyfriend, I feel like she just makes it very clear that it's like almost like he's there because he wants the drama of like the news. And even when she talks about it with him,
I think isn't there one point in which she either says that he said this or it came up at some point in their relationship, and this is why she felt like he was with her because of her past? Because in his own artistic endeavors, he wanted to paint her or photograph her.
Something along those lines.
He wanted to kind of use her story as fuel for his own creativity. And I think she really...
To me, that kind of right off the bat gave me the ick with this guy. Like I was just kind of, I don't know if that's maybe because we're learning about it from her perspective. Maybe that's not exactly.
It definitely gave her the ick.
It gave her the ick, but I mean, I got it because I was like, ew, that's kind of icky that this guy would, want to be with you just because of that.
Well, and just going back to just briefly touching on her as a wedding photographer, because we work with a photographer and she is a wedding photographer and she's so bubbly and cheerful. And, so when you see that type or that side to a wedding photographer, and then so that was just one of the personal things that I just drew on right away. It was just like, can you imagine being a young bride and then meeting your photographer and she's this very dismissive, sort of sullen. But yet if you like their work, I guess then you like their work, but
then you put up with their
that was one of the things that just struck me. And then and you brought this up, Chelsea, that she got a call and she did get, now I can't remember now, was it Cassidy or Olivia that gave her the call?
So her friend Olivia, or Liv, as she refers to her in the book, basically gives her a phone call, and we kind of later learn that Olivia is kind of their like the friend that just goes off. What's the word that I'm looking for?
She definitely has some kind of like manic depressive
Yes,
tendencies or
she does.
mental
She's-
disorder.
Yeah,
like-
she's very manic, and so we get that almost right away, but then we also learn about it a little bit more later on.
Mhm.
But Liv basically gives her or Olivia basically gives her a phone call and is like, hey, I need to talk to you.
Mhm.
And which at this time she thinks it's because they just found out that, the serial killer, the
Mhm.
person that
Stallings.
stabbed her,
Mhm. Is it Stall or
Stall.
Stalling?
Stall.
Stall. Okay.
Stahl,
Right. The serial
Alan-
killer. Alan Stahl.
Alan
Mhm. So
Stahl.
he's just died in prison.
from cancer.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So there was kind of like a sigh of relief, I think, because this was the man that 3 11-year-old girls put away
Put away, yeah.
in prison, but they later found out he was a serial killer. So he was.
They knew, they knew he was a serial killer, and it was basically Naomi's testimony that really put him away.
Put him away.
Mhm.
Because the other girls, I think their testimony was tainted because they had seen a picture of Stahl
Mhm.
before they were asked by the police to identify him.
Mhm.
So their testimony wasn't admissible, or their identification of him as the attacker wasn't
Mhm.
admissible in court.
Right.
So it really was Naomi's testimony and
Mhm.
her identification of Stahl that put him away, because she had been in a coma
Mhm.
when the other two girls were asked to ID him, right?
Right.
So she kind of carries the burden of and the fear of him coming for her when he gets out of prison eventually. She
Yes.
kind of carries that alone,
Because he had
even
made
though
that threat.
the other girls were there at the
Yes,
time.
he had made that threat that he would come
Yeah.
after her and kill her.
Yeah.
For putting him behind bars.
Right.
Yeah.
So she finds out that Stahl died in jail.
Mhm.
She at first, when the detective calls her to tell her news about Stahl, she automatically thinks, "Oh my God, he's been paroled."
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Right.
And then she's very
Yes.
worried. And then the
Yes.
detective says, "No, actually, he
Yes.
died in jail, and we have
Yes.
counseling if you need it." And she's like, "I don't need that."
That's right.
Um,
But then we get one of the first twists or turns in this book. And that's why I did appreciate this about this book. I
Mhm.
thought the author did a very good
Mhm.
job. So now we see that Naomi even has doubts that maybe she didn't put the right man behind bars because she is not, her memory is a little bit fuzzy.
yeah, I think the
Mhm.
guilt of like putting a man behind bars and we don't really learn that she's never fully been 100% in her
Mhm.
memory
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
it. And I think that's another thing about this book that I really liked, because even though she's still a young person in this book, as I'm approaching 50, I look back on my own memories and wonder how
Mhm.
much of them have just been kind of manufactured
Yes.
slowly over time.
Mhm.
So it's a really interesting
Mhm.
twist on this book, is that she's doubting
Mhm.
and then just consistently doubting and
That's
doubting and
right.
doubting.
So I like
So
that.
it's, yeah,
And I
it's an
think we,
interesting
like-
aspect.
A seed of doubt has been
Yeah.
planted that, oh gosh, really, was it Stahl that had attacked her? Because she had been stabbed 17 times and she had been brought out of the woods by, I believe it was Cody. I mean,
Mhm.
we'll get to Cody in a little bit, and she was just really fighting for her life at that point. So,
Mhm.
and she's also 11 years old
Yeah.
and having a trauma like that. So yes, and then the years afterwards,
Yeah.
I'm sure it really, and as you said, Kelly, the older you get, some of the memories that you have, it's like, okay, I'd really like to go back in time and really experience it
See
again,
what-
and
Yeah.
or
For
just
sure.
get a
and see what the
clearer
real
picture
skinny
in
is.
my mind of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the phone call that Naomi gets
Mhm.
that draws her back to her hometown is from Olivia.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And we find out that Naomi and Olivia have a bit closer of a relationship to each other
Mhm.
than
Yeah.
they have with the third friend,
Mhm.
whose name is Cassidy,
Yeah.
Mhm.
who also, like Olivia, still lives in the town.
Mhm.
Right. So you would think
Mhm.
that those two might have more of a friendship, but it turns out
Mhm.
that it's really Naomi and Olivia having phone dates and things like that keeps
Mhm.
them abreast of each other's lives. And I think Naomi really has a sense of caretaking for Olivia, right? Because she knows that Olivia has mental issues and kind of checks out. And we find out that Olivia, and one of the reasons why she does feel like a caretaker for her is because we find out that Olivia has tried to commit suicide.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So she, of course, so Naomi, she's like, gets this phone call from Olivia. And I want to say that even in the phone call, Olivia said, you have to come and we have to tell you I found her.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I think she says.
Because then another little seed is being planted from the author, and that is, so we find out about Persephone.
Yeah.
So, I can't remember now. I think she did. I think Olivia did say we need to talk about Persephone. I found her. So
she said.
So already we have, okay, there's another.
Who's this?
There's another little twist. Who's Persephone? Because who's called Persephone. So and we get a lot of backstory with Naomi, going back to her childhood.
But she immediately jumps in her car and drives back. Like she, and the other thing about that's interesting too is like she's kind of excited to get away from Mitch, even though she's not very excited to go back to her hometown, but she's worried about Olivia. Right.
Yeah.
So Olivia decides that it's time to tell the truth about Persephone. Now that keeping Stahl in prison is no longer a worry that they have. Do you guys feel like Olivia was planning to tell the truth to Naomi just about who Persephone was? Or do you think that Olivia was going to spill the beans on the whole experience of what had happened to Naomi when they were kids?
I think the whole experience.
I think so too. I think that, and as we see with Olivia's, and there's one phrase in the book, where Naomi's just talking about Olivia and just kind of just like even her weight. She just really wanted to disappear from this earth, even with her appearance, because the weight of, what they had found when they were 11 years old had been weighing on her all this time, her whole life.
Yeah.
And
I think what they had found and what they had done. I think that's why I think that's why she was always in manic depressive episodes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because she can never
get away from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is interesting because Cassidy could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
So before we get
do
into
we want to
Cassidy,
say anything about what happened, or do we want to save that for?
We can say that
later.
Well, I think I think the thing about Persephone and finding her and having this horrible secret, like at this point in the book, as the reader, like we're only focusing on Persephone. Like at this point in the book, we don't even know that Olivia has something more to hide, right?
That's true.
It's just like, who the heck is Persephone?
Yeah.
And why couldn't you bring her up all those years ago? Why was that a secret? So
right. Right. And
we don't even know who Persephone is for a long time.
We don't. And interestingly, I think it's so funny. So we can talk about meeting Cassidy and who this third character of these three girls is. But I think it's really interesting that we get to this point and we're already, as the reader, like expecting to like get this revelation about Persephone, but we don't even get that.
Yeah.
It still doesn't even come, which is amazing. Like I felt like
it's just Persephone, and you're just which is really good, because I think that really sets your mind up to go down different trails, and I think that's exactly
well, the anticipation of finding out about this.
Exactly
she really draws it out in a way that is smartly written, but also I can't believe how long she was able to do that in the book.
Well, and I think right around the time that Persephone enters into the scene is also when we get introduced to two other characters. Or like right shortly after that, when she makes her way to the motel, which is Cody, and then
podcast guy,
Ethan.
Yes. Right? And then she also gets a note from the serial killer's son, who's a junior, telling her that he knows that she put the wrong man behind bars, and that he did he want What exactly? I can't remember now.
He basically, she had gotten a letter and kind of didn't open it for a while. And then
Right.
when she did open it, she realizes that it's from Alan Stahl Jr., who is the son of the man that she put behind bars, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
And he's basically saying, I think he basically is like, I don't want anything from you and I'm not mad or coming after you, but I just am trying to like
Understand
why you did what you did.
Right.
Like
Why you put the wrong person
why did
behind
you
bars.
lie?
Yes.
basically.
Well, the interesting thing too is we don't really know at what point in time this letter was sent, because I think she goes to her dad's house, which turns out her dad's like this huge hoarder and, you know, an alcoholic and just, you know, not great circumstances. But basically when she goes to leave, he says, oh, there's
Here's
some
your
of your
mail.
stuff, you know, at the front, and she picks it up, and that's where she finds
Letter.
the letter.
So it could have been sitting there for years. We don't
Yeah.
even know.
Right. But when she did read it, so then that was another little twist that I liked, because it was because then we're presented with someone accusing Naomi of lying.
Yeah. So her doubts are even more coming into focus. Yeah.
So I thought that was actually very brilliant right there. And then, so a theme that does run throughout the book is who owns the story of what happened that day and who tells it, and how have different people claimed the story and with what goal. Does Naomi ever reclaim her story for herself? So, and as we said, so there's Olivia, and there's Cassidy, and then Naomi, and they were 11-year-olds in the woods one day, and then Naomi is attacked. Olivia and Cassidy run out, and then
she gets picked up by Cody.
She gets picked up by Cody.
Safety, yeah, or to the hospital.
Who we actually, so when she goes, so now Naomi's back in her little hometown, and she
runs into him,
and she's already met with Olivia or Liv and Cassidy. They've already had a little, you know, talk about, you know, what they need to do about Persephone, and they need to, you know, share that with the world.
They didn't even get to that point yet, did they?
Didn't they?
Because Olivia never actually tells them. She never gets the opportunity to tell them that she found Persephone, because she gets killed.
Right.
That happens.
Right. She does. She gets killed that night. But I thought Liv actually said, well, we do need to basically like tell our story.
I think, and then Cassidy basically shuts it down pretty quickly, where she says, well, you know, are you sure we need to do this? Let's talk about it.
We need to
some
think
more.
about it.
Yeah.
We need about it. Yeah. Right. So they all decide to sleep on it.
Right. And so, yeah, so everybody goes home. So actually, so Naomi drops Liv off at her house, right? Didn't Liv go in Naomi's car? Didn't
Naomi dropped Liv off, and then she went back to the
motel. Yeah, the motel.
Yeah.
And then she runs into Cody, who is basically the hero, because he's the one that found Naomi after being stabbed 17 times, and he's the one that brings her, you know, to the hospital and all of that. So they run into each other, and they have a nice little.
Well, what's interesting about Cody too is not only did he find her and bring her to the hospital, but she also talks about how he really was her hero, because she basically, besides her dad coming every so often to the hospital, he was really the only one that came and visited her when she was in the hospital. And that's basically her only memory of really being in the hospital.
Yeah.
So
they have like a kind of older brother, younger sister kind of.
Because he's about 10 years older, I think.
Yeah, it seems like it.
And so he is tied to this story too, because so Cassidy has an older brother named Oscar. And then Cody is friends with Oscar.
Right.
So Oscar is kind of like the golden boy, and Cody was the ne'er-do-well.
Right.
You know, kind of a friend. Although when he does reconnect with Naomi, I mean, he's really turned his life around, and he's a politician. He's a politician and married to
senator for their area.
Yeah.
Well, in regards to the question that we just
so now
the theme throughout the book,
we have the characters in place. So really, it's the three main characters. So it's Cassie, Liv, and Naomi.
Yeah. I mean, I think just the question that we just asked, a theme throughout the book: who owns the story of what happened that day and who tells it? I feel like the majority of the time, Cassidy like owned the story like a lot. Did we find that theme?
Oh,
happening?
yes.
I mean, it just seemed like she was the one that was like, this happened. you know, even when they were younger, oh yeah,
Mhm.
this is what happened.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm going to take, you know,
Mhm.
the initiative to make sure that everyone knows.
Yes.
She did, it seemed, control the
Yes.
narrative. And I do think that because her father is the mayor of their
Mhm.
small town,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
he was able to control the narrative through her.
Mhm.
So she just grew up kind of
Mhm.
having control of it.
Mhm.
Liv was too much of a mess to be in
Yes.
control of any of it.
Yes.
And then Naomi basically,
I think she was just trying to be a survivor.
yeah.
I do.
And then she left.
Mhm.
That's the other
That's
thing.
right.
She left the town.
That's right.
Well, also Naomi grows up in, you know, not a great household.
Mhm.
You know, and she even states this at the beginning of the book. Naomi states, I don't know why Cassidy ended up claiming us as her friends, but she
Mhm.
did.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
so, and I
And-
think we do learn why, like later on, you know, in
Yes.
the book.
Well, and also too, their friendship is set up as being very contentious, you know, from the get go. You know, they get together, they get into a fight, then they make up. You know, get together,
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's always that
Cassidy had this like controlling
very she's a
personality
very
even when they were kids.
yes.
Very controlling and
overpowering.
manipulative.
She was a queen bee, I think.
Yeah, definitely
She
the
was
queen bee.
definitely the queen bee.
Yeah.
And there again, when you're a child, and so Naomi's growing up in squalor, and her mom left, and her dad's somewhat of a deadbeat, and then one of her best friends is the mayor's daughter, and lives in this amazing house, and that's a big when you're young and your transformative years. I think that could be a very big hurdle to cross.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
I
sure
do.
Naomi probably felt like she was lucky to have a friend,
Mhm.
like Cassidy,
Mhm.
as kind of being a saving grace of like my life would be really, really difficult
Mhm.
without,
Mhm.
Yeah.
having this kind of bright shining star in it.
For
Mhm.
sure.
So okay, so back to the theme. So we think that Cassidy really has owned this story
Yeah,
through the
I do.
years. And I think and I do think that Liv now has just come to the point where she just really can't live with it anymore.
Yeah.
And she really wants to bring certain things out into the open. And it's not just Persephone. We find that out later. It's
Yeah.
not just Persephone, but it starts with Persephone.
Yeah.
Then it morphs into other things. So but going back to looking at some of the questions here, and we are getting our questions from bookbrowse.com. So, and we'll have everything linked down below. If you're watching on YouTube, we can link those things down below. But back to the question. So it says Naomi says of the Summer of the Goddess game that the friends were starting to outgrow their games and created a sense of desperation to hold on to their private world. How do you think this influences the girls' decision to keep Persephone a secret?
Well, let's go ahead and talk about what Persephone is.
Spoiler alert. who Persephone really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think Cassidy did as far as like being a master manipulator and kind of lord over this little friend group is that she created these goddess games that they would play that were really games that were infused with like
Witchcraft
magic and witchcraft and things like this.
spells.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they're already starting to kind of play
Herbs
these
and-
games, and then the girls come across the skeleton remains of someone
Yes.
who the skeleton is wearing a bracelet that says Persephone.
Uh-huh.
Like the beads of the bracelet spell out Persephone, and so this
Mhm.
is how we find Persephone, right? And so she
Mhm.
becomes kind of their they kind of Cassidy kind of creates this narrative of Persephone, the skeleton, kind of being the
like center of all of these
of the
goddess
power that they have,
Yeah.
for these witchcrafty games that they're playing,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Which I don't know. That just really kind of creeped me out.
Mhm.
The whole thing, the whole thought of 11-year-olds keeping a skeleton secret
Yeah.
was like, I mean, and this is where.
Well, and I think initially, I don't know if it was Naomi or Liv, but one of them I think said, "Oh, do we need to go and tell someone?"
Yes.
Yes, I think they
Yes.
And I think
Yes, you do.
Cassidy. Well, I think Cassidy is the one that shut it down,
Yes.
and she's like, "Well,
Right?
no, like we're playing these games, and we found her. Like, can you believe that
It's
we
a
found?
sign,
It's
yeah.
a sign."
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, especially just
Yes.
them being out in the woods and
Yeah.
They would even think that
I know.
to not tell anyone.
I
It kind
know.
of reminds me of, do you remember that movie Stand By Me, when the boys set off in purpose to go find that dead body that they heard
Mhm.
about?
Mhm.
Mm,
Kind of reminds me of that
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah.
But I think we see, going back to the question that we just kind of talked about owning the story,
Mhm.
as we're getting more and more
Mhm.
flashbacks, we're realizing that Cassidy is like
Mhm.
clearly manipulating these girls with
Yes.
these games, like,
From the get-go.
making them believe that this magic is really happening, that
Yes.
if they break off the finger bones of Persephone and carry
Yes.
them around like talismans, good things will
Mhm.
happen.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then there's the whole rituals, like having to perform these
The seven
rituals in
Mhm.
order for what? Do we ever really find out? Like, what's
No.
the end purpose of
I
the?
don't think we ever really
Mm-mm.
actually do find out what the end purpose of that was.
Yeah.
So, like, if we complete all of these 7 things, what will happen? We
Mhm.
don't ever know. And so,
Yeah.
but she's leading these girls down this
Uh-huh.
road of, like,
I know.
kind of darker and darker
Mhm.
behavior.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we are starting to get a little bit more of an insight into Cassidy.
Yeah.
I mean, as the book progresses, which is
For
very
sure.
interesting. And I think that's also, I think this writer has really done an excellent job with that. She doesn't reveal things too soon or
Mhm.
too late. I mean, she really, the pacing,
Mhm.
that was one of the things that I liked about this book. I thought the pacing was excellent.
Yeah.
And that's usually what can, especially like with murder, suspense, they can kind of stall out sometimes
Mhm.
and go, I don't read them as much as you do, but
Yeah.
I have read a few and they can kind of stall out a little bit,
Mhm.
especially in the middle.
Yeah.
But I never felt that with this
Yeah.
book at all. I thought the pacing was great. And so, since we are talking about Cassidy, so let's talk about her brother, Oscar, because he does play a little bit of a role here. And we do see that Naomi despises Oscar and was victimized by him as a child, yet has repeatedly sought him out. So, what do you think draws Naomi to Oscar despite her feelings towards him?
Well, I think she talks about it a little bit in the sense of, I mean, I guess, I don't know. Do we want to talk maybe a little bit about what happened to her when she was 11 with Oscar? And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so essentially, I think I mean, she obviously knew Oscar because she would always go over to their house, I
Right.
think, for
Mhm.
sleepovers when she was friends with Cassidy. And I think Oscar to her was always, like you said, golden boy, but also
Mhm.
was just kind of like this brute, really big. Um, I mean, I guess what were they, like 19 or 18 at the time? Because
Yeah,
they were,
I think they must have been like 18, 19, 'cause I
yeah.
think they were still in high school.
So I think that she just always kind of saw him as I don't know if it was not necessarily a nice guy. I don't think he was ever very nice to her when
he
she
would make
was,
fun of her.
yeah, like make
I
fun.
think she talks about like when she needed a training bra, but her
Yeah.
family,
Couldn't
her
afford
dad,
it.
Right.
yeah,
Or
and her
she didn't
dad
want to tell
wouldn't
her
buy her
dad.
one or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
And so she would go to Cassidy's house, and
Yeah.
Oscar would like make fun of her
Yeah.
for hitting puberty, and would just be kind of nasty and gross, as
Yeah.
boys can be.
Mm-hmm.
And then Cody was always telling Oscar, "You knock it off, leave her alone. She's just a kid," that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she already didn't like Oscar.
Well, and so the first, not the first, but an encounter that she talks about is when she was at the gas station and she comes out and basically Oscar pushes her up against this wall and almost tries to like feel her up.
Mm-hmm.
And then Cody comes up and essentially stops it and then beats the crap out of Oscar.
Mm-hmm.
So again, Cody becoming the hero
Mhm.
of the story. And I think that's kind of where it first started and then ultimately led to a relationship that maybe shouldn't have happened later down the line. But I think um her like sexual choices
Yeah.
probably haven't been the best throughout the whole book.
I think she
Mhm.
just really had guilt and self-hatred
Yes.
and self-destructive
Yes.
tendencies that
Yeah.
made her
And no
seek out
and no
purposely
self-worth.
bad.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
she-
I think her self-worth was
Yeah. That's why I think she kept going back to Oscar.
Mhm.
Was
like
that
she wanted to
It was.
feel a level of like pain or hurt.
yeah,
Mhm.
And
that would
she
take
knew-
her out of
yeah.
the pain that she was already
Mhm.
feeling. Yeah.
Exactly.
And she knew, because she hated Oscar, she knew that he could provide that for her. So she would just keep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's how I interpreted
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I did too.
Self-inflicted pain.
Yeah.
Self-loathing.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, well, let's go on to Olivia's parents, because they concealed what they believed happened in the woods for years to protect their daughter. But they also helped care for Naomi and continued to let the girls be friends. Why do you think they made the choices they did? And do you think they made the right choice? So this is Liv's parents.
Yeah, that's a tough,
Mm-hmm.
that's a really tough one, right?
Mhm.
Because you kind of see it from the parents' perspective. And actually, should, before we get into exactly like our thoughts and feelings about her parents, probably we should
Reveal
actually
what happened.
talk
Mhm.
about what happened, because
Yeah.
it's hard to answer that question without.
Yeah.
It is. So we think at the opening of the book that Naomi has been attacked by Stahl,
Mhm.
and that's who is put behind bars. But
The serial killer.
the serial killer. But we do find out that the perpetrators of the crime were Cassidy and Liv.
Yeah.
And
And
that's
actually, that Cassidy put Liv up to it, but
Uh-huh.
Liv couldn't complete it, and so then Cassidy took
had
over
to
and
right.
Mhm.
And even
stabbing.
yeah, 17 times. 17.
It was very
times.
aggressive.
Very aggressive.
You know what? My
So-
favorite part of that revelation
Mhm.
is when Naomi is realizing that she wasn't stabbed 17 times because a brutal man wanted to brutalize her. She was
Mhm.
stabbed 17 times because she was being stabbed by two weak girls
Yeah.
who couldn't
Yeah. Get the job done.
get
Yeah.
the job done.
I know.
That like the way that the author wrote that
Mhm.
revelate, like I was like, it was like, oh my gosh.
Mhm.
And you just felt, I don't know, it was a very powerful way to put it.
Mhm.
The revelation that Naomi is having in her thoughts about
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
Yeah.
it was because they were weak. It wasn't because they were brutal.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's such a, or strong. It's such a, I felt like that was amazing. But
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, so and we can go back to the little bits and details that lead us as the reader to this point. But yeah, we find out that it's one of the goddess game
Mhm.
The
situations, that
seventh ritual.
the seventh ritual that gets these girls to,
Yeah.
or that gets Cassidy to the point where they are going to kill Naomi.
To
Mhm.
make a sacrifice.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, so Cassidy puts Liv up to it, but Liv can't finish it.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
So this is what brings us to Olivia's parents concealed what they believed happened. So we also
Right.
find out that everyone knew about this except for Naomi.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know.
Everyone
right?
involved in terms of the two girls, all the
The
parents.
families. Yeah. So the
Mhm.
two families and yes.
Yes.
Well, and there's a
So
lot of
so Naomi's been gaslit her entire
Yeah.
life with the most traumatic experience that
Mhm.
she has gone through and that she's had to fight against her entire life. And then also too, I thought it was very interesting because then the families did, close ranks and then somehow protect Naomi then weirdly.
well, they kind of
But they had
foreshadow
to.
this
They had
Yeah.
to.
the whole book when they do flashbacks to the hospital, and then also we learn later on, where they basically are shoving pictures of this stall guy.
Mhm.
Oh, well, this is the person
Uh-huh.
that attacked. And I think Cassidy probably immediately thought, oh, this is
Mhm.
our way out. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Yes, that's the
Yeah.
person that attacked us.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
her
You
father,
know?
her
Yeah,
father
and
made
her
that
father.
happen. He
Yeah.
chose, I mean, he totally orchestrated that
Yes.
entire
Exactly.
thing. He's
The mayor.
and
Yes.
the police chief at the time are the ones that had the
Yeah.
picture.
Oh, those politicians.
Yeah. So they completely manufactured that because and it was convenient because there was this serial killer and Stahl was a serial killer. He just wasn't the attacker of her.
Right.
This. Yeah.
Right. So they killed a bird with a stone with that. Right.
They did.
And then they were also able to cover up what actually happened and just, so from Olivia's parents' perspective, they must have just been completely horrified that their daughter did this.
Yes.
Mhm.
They also realize that she is mentally unstable, and this just makes her even more mentally unstable.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So of course they don't want her to end up in an institution or in prison, so I
Mhm.
can totally see
Mhm.
Them protecting
them
her.
Right.
doing this, right?
Especially because of their age. They're only 11 years old.
Well, and then Olivia's dad,
Mhm.
and I don't think that Naomi's dad is ever like fully cognizant of the truth. I think he has some inklings, but as we remember, he was pretty inebriated
Yes.
Yeah.
during a
was.
lot. Even though he says he did get sober while she was in the hospital,
Mhm.
his memory can't be trusted.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But the parents, Olivia's parents, paid him money as
Mhm.
recompense for
Mhm.
what their daughter did to his daughter,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
interesting. And he keeps that from his daughter, which is
Mhm.
interesting. And she
Yeah.
finds that out, you know. So
Mhm.
it's there's a lot of cover up going on in this
Mhm.
tiny town.
And a lot of revelations that Naomi had no idea when she was coming back that she would be faced with all of that. I mean, I think at the beginning of the book, at least this was my take on it, she's feeling somewhat relieved because Stahl is finally dead and she knows that he can never come after her.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then she's back and then all these things are then starting to be
Well,
revealed to her. And it's just like, I just can't even imagine having to navigate all of that.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, so then we're also introduced to this podcast gentleman. It's
Mhm.
always interesting that it's always podcasters now that are,
trying to
when
come out with a story.
uh-huh,
when you're talking
they
about
are.
serial killers and true crime, it was the
Yes.
perfect.
Well, so
It
real quick
is.
before I move on to the podcasters, since
Mhm.
we talked a little bit about Olivia's dad paying out
Yes.
Naomi's dad,
Mhm.
at first she thought that it was the mayor
Right.
that paid out because we finally come to find out who Persephone is.
I know.
So,
I know.
and come to find out,
Mhm.
she ultimately had an affair with the mayor.
The mayor.
Mhm.
Yeah. So this is another so this is almost like a story within a story.
Yeah.
The Persephone storyline. So Olivia gets killed before she has the chance to tell the
Mhm.
other two girls that she found out who
She
Persephone
gets
is.
killed very quickly in the book.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, very
I actually,
quickly.
I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I was surprised by that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
Yeah.
Liv's out of the picture. So we never hear.
So we never find out, so Naomi never finds out. She knows that
We didn't even
it's
know where
about
Persephone is.
But
Yeah.
but she
Yeah.
doesn't, So
Right.
she kind of as a sort of not necessarily homage, but she felt like Olivia did this work to find this
Yeah.
person. Now I'm going to pick up the mantle and I'm going to figure it out.
Mhm.
And she does.
Mhm.
With the help of podcast man,
Podcast
Yeah.
guy.
I
Yeah.
know.
Ethan.
Ethan, who and
Also has a fake name.
I know.
Or also changed his name for good reason.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I there were a lot of twists and turns in this book, and as I said, the pacing was really, really good. So they were revealed at very opportunistic times, but I will tell you this. So we'll cut. We'll kind of summarize everything and cut to the end because I know our time is getting short. But one of the things that I do know to look for in murders or suspense and thrillers is that red herring. It's like that one thing that's just there for no good reason.
Yeah.
So when Cody came back into the picture,
The hero.
the hero, I know, right? The hero. I'm like, I think this is a red herring.
Yeah.
I can't, and he seemed like too good to be true. I mean, he was like super handsome and he put his life together and successful,
and
married,
kids.
wife and kids, so he had like all of these wonderful qualities that seemingly, took him out of the mix. But my senses were up when he was introduced.
So I feel like Cody actually was a good guy.
Yeah.
Is the vibe that I got. And he got mixed up into situations that then he probably could have handled a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So we find out that he really likes Persephone, which is this girl actually named Jessie.
Jennifer. I thought it was Jennifer.
Jessie Walker.
Jessie Walker.
Jessie.
Yeah.
So he really likes this girl, Jessie Walker, and she obviously is having an affair with the mayor, Cassidy's dad. And I guess they ultimately find themselves in a car and she falls and hits her head and he basically leaves her for dead.
And doesn't tell anybody.
Well, he comes back and she's gone.
People not telling things.
And when she's gone, she had basically found her way into that hole and ultimately died. And so, I mean, you can see where he tried to do the right thing, but didn't happen. And I think that's where it basically ties us back to Olivia and Cassidy in the sense that Cassidy blackmails him. And ultimately he's the one that he's the one that shoots Olivia, right? Yeah. Which we find out. Yeah.
And
so
Naomi
that kind of ties
that out.
Yeah, because he doesn't want it uncovered.
Yeah.
Right.
because it would put him in a very bad light.
Yeah. This is a hard book to talk about in an hour-long podcast.
know,
There's
It
just,
is.
as
There's
we're
so
talking,
many-
there's so many twists and
I
turns.
will tell you,
Like,
there's
there's so much that we're
So
not
many,
talking.
And it-
yeah.
And especially in the last third. of the
It's
book.
actually really
In
hard.
the
to
last
tie it
third of the
together.
book,
It
it was
is.
like,
Yeah.
it was this person that did it. No, it's
It
not.
was-
It's
yeah.
this person that did it. No, it's not. It's really only the last, like, that's how any book wraps up in the last 30 pages. But I'm also like, why are you going into the woods? Don't go into the
Yeah.
woods. Why don't? But of course you have to.
I know.
Because you have to have that drama. You wouldn't have, you wouldn't have
Well,
the spectacular
So-
ending if you didn't do dumb things like that.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But so just to like kind of quickly get to it, we find out that Ethan is a changed name from Alan
Mhm.
Stahl Jr. So Naomi finds out that
Ta-da.
because Cassidy,
that
wants
was the
to
biggest shock to me of
It
all
was.
because that
I didn't see that
I
coming.
did not see that coming.
yeah,
see that
Ca-
coming.
I actually had a feeling.
Did you?
I kind of
really?
did. Yeah. And so Cassidy reveals that, her father, she had her father do some digging on Ethan, and it turns out that Ethan is Stahl's son. And so
Yeah.
he wrote that letter to Naomi,
Yeah.
and she's totally hurt and betrayed. Part of me was like, I don't know how you didn't, I don't know. I kind of let that go, and I felt like the two of them had more in common than not, and I felt like ultimately they could have had a friendship, and
I
they
kind of
should have.
wanted them to end up together.
I did
at the
too.
end.
I
Like,
did
I
too.
felt bad for both of them, and I
Yes.
think because we ultimately learned that Ethan, or Alan Stahl Jr., the
Mhm.
podcaster, he was actually not there to inflict harm on
No.
Naomi or anyone. He was there
Right.
to understand the situation,
Right.
and he was actually a very caring person.
And he was
Yes,
trying.
and
He was trying to
he-
get some closure.
Yeah.
Well, and he wanted his dad. He knew his
He
dad
did.
was a serial
Yeah.
killer. He knew his dad was
Yes.
hurting people. So he actually was totally
Yes.
good with
Fine,
his dad
yeah.
being sent away. But it did change his whole life.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Naomi not being able to get past the fact that he lied is what irritated me. 'Cause
Yeah.
I feel like you've been through all this. You
I
can't
know.
forgive this guy for what
know.
I mean.
The one
know.
friend that actually
That's right. You
Exactly.
changed
There
your
for you.
name.
Exactly. It really pissed me
It was a
off.
little bit
Like
more than that,
if there
but
was one
yes.
thing I really didn't
I
like
know.
about her, it was her unwillingness to
Mhm.
forgive.
Yeah.
Ethan.
Mhm.
Because she had just been so like betrayed by everyone, and I
Yeah.
get that she
Yes.
felt betrayed by him too. But
Yes.
when it came down to it, he was the only one that
Mhm.
he saved her
Yeah.
life in the end.
That's right.
No, I
And-
agree.
And meant everything for good and not
I
evil.
will-
Mhm.
Yeah, I will say though that the what happens to Naomi at the end of this book, even though she lives and she comes out of everything, okay, that the scene of her being attacked and shot is just so brutal.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, just imagining her, she's in the cave with Persephone trying to hide for her life from Cody, who's
Mhm.
chasing her with a gun.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
Fingers are shot off. Like her
Mhm.
2 fingers are shot off. She's shot in the back. I mean, it's just
Mhm.
horrible.
Yeah.
Oh, so brutal. That was
Mhm.
tough to listen to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So overall, what would you rate this book?
What's our
Before we
rating
close out.
system? Are we
1
like,
through 10?
1 through
1
10?
through 10. Or we can do 1 through 5.
I would say like an 8.5.
8.5.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm somewhere in that range, like
Mhm.
8, 7.5, 8.
Mhm. I thought it was thoroughly entertaining.
Yeah.
It really kept me on the edge of my seat. And as I said, there was like so many twists and turns, and I really felt the author handled them all very, very well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
So I would give it, I would say like an 8.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
8.5. Mm-hmm. I totally
I
would.
do think we all agree too that this could be a really wonderful
Movie.
6
Yeah,
or
a
10
limited series.
part.
Yes,
Limited
I could
series.
Actually, series probably.
I think
yeah.
series would
Yeah.
be good because there's so many
It would be
nooks and crannies.
It would be
Yeah.
hard. It would be hard to put this into a
Yeah.
All the
2-hour
good things
movie.
would be left out, I feel
That's
like.
true.
So
They
as
would.
we learned with
Yeah.
It ends with us.
it ends with us, yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with New and Noteworthy. And we're back for my very favorite segment, and that's where we share what is on our radar screen, whether it's new or noteworthy. And this episode, Chelsea, I'm going to kick it off with you. So what do you have for us?
I have a movie that Andrew made me watch last night called
Oh,
Longlegs.
Longlegs.
It's a
Sounds
scary
like
movie.
I was going to say, that sounds like a horror movie.
It's a scary movie.
All the
It
scary movies
actually
are coming out at that time of year.
Mhm.
it has 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's actually pretty good.
Mhm.
It's basically about an FBI agent is assigned to an unsolved serial killer case. And she's basically trying to piece together why these are happening. And it starts back up, like more murders take place like once she starts to investigate. And essentially the serial killer is obviously, his name is Longlegs. And it's Nicolas Cage, I think Nicolas Cage
really?
is Longlegs.
Oh,
And
wow.
when I tell you, he's creepy.
Yeah.
He is
See
creepy.
that for sure.
Okay. Is this recent?
It's recent. So it just came out. We had to actually buy it to rent it. So it like just came out. It was
Not even
I
for
think it
rent
might
yet.
still be in theaters.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard of this movie.
So Longlegs.
Longlegs.
So you
It's
liked
good.
it?
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, if you're not into horror thriller movies, then don't watch it.
Don't
But
watch
if
it.
you are, then it's good.
Okay. And Kelly, what do you have this week?
I actually kind of have a similar horror,
Ah.
slightly horror. This is an AMC anthology show called The Terror,
Uh-huh.
and it falls into this historical supernatural terror genre, kind of like, I don't know if you've heard of Penny Dreadful or The Luminaries. Both really great shows that are these historical supernatural stories. So the first season is available on Netflix. It's an AMC show that was on and then got canceled, or it was on and then they did, I think, a season 2, and then it kind of got canceled, or one of those things where the fans really they didn't realize how good it was until it was gone, right? So, which is why season 1 is available on Netflix, and then season 2 is not on Netflix, though I imagine hopefully it'll end up there, because season 3 is actually premiering in 2025. So the one that I watched, the first season, is about it's based on the true account. It's a fictionalized account of a true event of a lost expedition to the Arctic from 1845 to 1848. So it's based on a book. The author of the book is one of the producers. One of the executive producers is also Ridley Scott, which kind of lends some name power to it. The series is good. It's got some really amazing actors in it. Jared Harris from Mad Men, Tobias Menzies from Outlander, and Kieran Hines, who was Dumbledore in Harry Potter. So it's a great cast. It's a tough watch, I will say. It's a great.
It sounds like it.
It's a great.
I think I might be skipping this one because as you're explaining it, I'm like,
it's really interesting, and I feel like it's one of these kind of prestigious shows that kind of maybe isn't a rewatchable, but it's really kind of changing the way that TV is being done. I feel like so. I feel like it's kind of important for that reason.
Okay.
I enjoyed it. Won't watch it again, but I did enjoy it. I liked it.
All right. Well, and I will wrap it up with a book that actually is a limited series right now. So this is The Perfect Couple by Elin Hilderbrand, who is known as the Queen of Nantucket. She actually lives there and she writes a lot of her books set in Nantucket. So I thoroughly enjoyed the book, and I thoroughly enjoyed the limited series, which stars Nicole Kidman, who I love. And we're actually going to be doing a podcast about Nicole. So if you want to read it, if you want to watch it, highly recommend The Perfect Couple, because they're not so perfect, but it's so good. And that wraps up another episode of Message from Mom, where we're busting the myth that mothers-in-law aren't necessarily monsters-in-law.